Episode 112, Snow Queen 3. Cordelia lost her sight, but she could clearly feel it. The arm of Jude, whom she could trust and depend on, as he tightly hugged her waist. When did he grow up like this? Cordelia thought while in Jude's arms. And she could hear it. The roar of 4 dragons. The surging powerful force that awakened, bringing destruction and ruin to everything. The hairs on her entire body seemed to stand up. A shudder ran along her back, and her heart was pounding. 9th Heaven's 9 doors, 4th door. The cause that changed everything. 4 black dragons were released at the same time. Strong. He definitely changed. He didn't become a little stronger because he reached the 4th door after being 1/5 away from it. Rather, he entered a completely different realm when he opened the 4th door. Scary. That was the short thought that crossed her mind, because the dragon's energy that rose from Jude's entire body was so chaotic. Anger, rage, violent emotions that seemed to burst out anytime soon. It hurts. Jude hugged Cordelia on her waist so tightly that she felt like being crushed. She felt like her back was going to break. This fool. But her voice didn't come out properly. She had no strength left in her entire body, to the point that she couldn't do anything. But she felt his touch. Because her sight was gone, her senses became more sensitive, and she could perfectly feel it. The hand of Jude, which had released the black dragons earlier, were now caressing Cordelia's cheek. Cordelia flinched. She became more scared. But it was for a short moment. Because she soon understood it. Why Jude was angry. And the very gentle and soft touch of Jude's hand on her cheek. It's healing. Jude touched Cordelia's closed eyes and chanted a spell. The white light from the ring seemed to be absorbed by Cordelia's eyes, and she slowly opened her eyes. I can see. Her vision was still blurred, but she could see roughly. After hearing Cordelia's exclamation, Jude sighed in relief and caressed her cheek again. I'm sorry, it must have been really painful, right? His voice was slightly different than usual. Moreover, he was touching her cheek. So Cordelia was embarrassed and pretended to be calm to overcome this strange situation. HMPH, it was very difficult. I'm sorry. Jude apologized again, and Cordelia was seriously overwhelmed by a strange feeling. She wanted to shout to him to just behave like usual and not act like this. She felt like closing her eyes was better while her heart began beating as if it was going to burst. Why are you doing this? The reason why Jude was acting like this to her. And Jude moved again. He stared straight into Cordelia's eyes and said, I'll be back. Cordelia unconsciously nodded. Jude unexpectedly smiled after seeing her blushing face as she meekly nodded. He then moved her very carefully. He gently sat Cordelia, who plopped down because of her weak legs, before he looked back at the Guardian. Cordelia felt him letting out his repressed anger. Gia-ra-ra-ra. The Guardian weakly growled. But it was different from before. It felt fear. It felt like being restrained by energy of the powerful dragon emanating from Jude. Gia-ra-ra-ra-ra. It wasn't waiting for Jude and Cordelia. However, it had no choice but to only wait. Because it's scared. Cordelia sensed the Guardian's fear. She could clearly feel it because of her senses that were more like a beast than a human's. The energy of the dragon coming from Jude. The power of the black dragon burned like a black flame and covered Jude's whole body. Cordelia's eyes were not completely cured. It was still blurry, and she couldn't see the colors well. But that was why she could clearly see it. Jude stood in front of her. She saw Jude's back, and the black dragon just before it soared into the sky. Come, Jude spoke in a low voice. It was a small voice, but she could clearly hear it. His voice was like the gentle ripples that spread out. What is this shyness? Why was she feeling shy? The Guardian reacted while Cordelia was fidgeting. It loudly roared as if to shake away its fear. Ruzua. The living swords and shields moved at the same time. They flew in to crush and smash Jude and Cordelia. In all directions. At the same time. But Jude was not afraid. He saw, felt, calculated, and took action. Thud. A low and dull sound. But what happened then was so fast and light. Black wind's advent. The jet black wind and the golden whirlwinds. Jude traversed the place. He looked to the right and stretched out his hand to the living shield. Black Dragon release technique. The black dragon roared as it rushed forward. It not only struck the living shield but also pushed it. The center of the living shield sunk, and it flew straight to the wall and crashed. Bowing. There was a loud noise. But it was too late. Jude had already run to the left. The living sword. The blade flew straight ahead. Jude rotated his body in the air. As he did that, he sent a kick towards the flying living sword. The black dragon's energy was released at the same time. He swung his foot to the ground. Bowing. The flying living sword was struck to the ground. And it only took 2 seconds for all of that to happen. That short duration of time. Thus, the living swords and shields could not attack the sitting Cordelia. 1 second was insufficient for that. In that 1 second, Jude crossed the space. At the moment the living sword hit the floor and made a loud noise, he kicked the ground and became faster than sound. He turned to Cordelia and stretched out his arms. He added a black gale to the black dragon's energy. Black dragon, gale form. Quia. 2 black dragons came out from Jude's hands and wildly shook with the air. The living sword and shield were trapped in a black vortex and ended up being flung onto the wall and ceiling. Barring. A loud sound reverberated at almost the same time. Cordelia blinked her eyes, and Jude turned his head. He rushed towards the Guardian, who was flustered that the living swords and shields were no longer moving. Zrugora. The Guardian roared and charged forward. But its momentum was weak. It was dispirited, so its actions and thoughts seemed to be all visible. Barring. Black Dragon's thunder form. The jet-black energy exploded with the golden thunderbolt. Jude's spin kick struck the Guardian's head. The emanating black dragon's energy hit the Guardian's head and sent it to the ground. Thud! The Guardian's large body collapsed. After having turned several times in the air, Jude landed on the ground and made another dash. Thunder strike. Bang! A thunderbolt burst again. The lightning strike hit the chest of the Guardian, who couldn't even properly scream. Bang! But it was a Guardian. It absorbed the dragon aura from the ground and the lightning that struck its whole body. As soon as it stopped Jude's attack, it roared. Kara. Dragon fear. A power that causes fear. Bang! But it was useless. Jude roughly stomped on the ground and caused a loud noise. It was to stop the Guardian's skill as he let out the dragon's energy at the same time. The Guardian's dragon fear was neutralized by the noise, filled with a stronger dragon's energy. Kuzara. The Guardian writhed and screamed, and Jude calculated it again. The height of the ceiling, the size of the Guardian, the power required to make it fly up, and the time it would stay in the air. I have to finish it in the air. He was in a situation where he had to do everything himself, but it took too long for him to finish it off through that way. After sending it flying into the air and cutting off its power supply from the dragon vein, he had to finish it with 1 strike. He needed to do 2 things. A means to send it flying into the air, and a powerful technique to finish it off while in the air. Kuzar. The Guardian writhed again, so Jude halted his thoughts and moved. Jude punched the Guardian in the chest, making it crouch again. He retreated and deliberately let the Guardian have time to get up before he struck it again. Wham! The Guardian was a 4-legged beast, so when he struck it on its back, he saw its chest and belly. As the Guardian was lying on the floor, Jude did a handstand and aimed for the Guardian's abdomen at the same time. He kicked the Guardian's abdomen with all his power. Bang! The black dragon's energy soared. It hit the waist and sent the Guardian into the air. Bang! The Guardian crashed into the ceiling, then it began to fall. The remaining time until it reached the ground was only a few seconds. Jude corrected his posture and drew the Eastern Warrior's sword from his waist. He infused it with the black dragon's energy. Then he realized. The ceiling was too low. There was not enough time to gather enough power to kill it off. But Jude did not stop. Because he saw it. A green power swallowed the Guardian. It was the witch's telekinetic power which held the Guardian in the air. After all, you can't do it without me. He heard Cordelia's voice from behind him. It also seemed like he heard the words that she left out saying. Cordelia. Combat genius. She didn't just watch. She restored her mana by using mana drain on the dragon aura rising from the ground. The efficiency was definitely not very good. But even so, she could recover her mana from it. And as a result, as expected, you're the best. Jude said. He smiled and drew the Eastern warrior's sword before swinging it towards the Guardian who was stuck in the air and couldn't move. Black Dragon, Hell's Blood Slash. The black blade did its job well. The violent slash tore up the ground and cut across its neck. Slash. The Guardian's neck snapped, as if it had been bitten by a dragon's teeth. Cordelia released her telekinetic power, and the Guardian's giant body fell to the ground. Boom! The Guardian's head and neck hit the ground, and the floor cracked with a loud noise. And a succession of white light rings appeared around Jude and Cordelia. Level up. Jude was now 65, Cordelia was now 64. Hard. Cordelia panted as her shoulders drooped down, and Jude turned to Cordelia. The Snow Queen was important, but for now he wanted to go to Cordelia. Cordelia looked up and saw Jude. Jude saw Cordelia. And immediately after, Kralak, they heard a sound. The two raised their heads at the same time and saw a crack spreading on the ceiling. Kralak, and the sound was heard again. It was on the walls and floor this time, and the two looked at each other. Zar. The crack grew bigger. It wasn't surprising, because they had done all sorts of violent acts, which had randomly struck the walls and ceiling. Hurry up, Cordelia shouted, and Jude quickly turned around. After running to the pillar, he removed the Snow Queen's core through the process Melissa had told them. Choke. Debris fell from the ceiling little by little. The cracks kept growing, so it was possible for a large debris to fall down soon. But the biggest problem was the walls and floor. Golden energy began to come out from the cracks in the floor. It was evidently the pure energy of the dragon veins. Hurry! Cordelia shouted again, and Jude quickly ran. He snatched the waist of the standing Cordelia, and he turned towards the elevator at the same time. He had no way of opening the door, so he broke the elevator door with a drop kick. Bang! Up! Fortunately, Melissa responded. The elevator began to rise, and the two saw the walls and floor of the development room collapse through the broken elevator door, and they also saw the golden energy engulf the Guardian's body. QY. The elevator continued to go up. Jude sank to his knees and collapsed, and Cordelia groaned as she ended up falling on the floor too. Are you okay? I'm not okay, my eyes can't see, my bones are aching too, everything hurts. Jude smiled at her unconscious grumbling. Just like Cordelia, he said unconsciously too. I'm lucky. What? Because you're with me. Jude turned to Cordelia. He revealed a bit of his inner thoughts. But whether he was lucky or not, Cordelia's eyes were not completely healed. So their eye-to-eye conversation failed this time. HMPH, it's good if you realized that. Cordelia snorted and spoke like usual, and Jude slightly frowned, but soon had a sly smile as always. You're not wrong, my princess. HMPH, you're just good at words. After deliberately grumbling more than usual, Cordelia leaned her head against Jude's chest. She didn't want to admit it, but she felt relieved when she leaned her head on him. She closed her eyes and let her body recover from the fatigue. She deeply fell asleep. Thank you very much, thank you so much. As he carried the deeply sleeping Cordelia in the so-called princess carry, Jude nodded and stepped out of the elevator. What happened to the development room? It completely collapsed, but it's fine. The Snow Queen's core was removed, so an explosion won't happen. As Melissa smiled and spoke, Jude automatically turned to Cordelia. I must be seriously ill. When he heard the word explosion, he thought of Cordelia's widely smiling face. No, it was Cordelia who was ill and not Jude himself. In any case, the collapse of the Skyroof mountain range was prevented, and the birth of the light dragon Yalavaska was also stopped. It was clearly a great achievement. The only ones who know are Cordelia and me. There's also Melissa. In fact, Melissa didn't know anything about light dragon Yalavaska, so she only thought that the two did a good job. Well, that's enough. Jude himself was a man. If he was the only one who knew that he saved the world, he would have found it regrettable, but he wasn't alone. It was a knowledge he shared with Cordelia. He felt warm with that thought alone. I got a lot of things. He opened the fourth door of the ninth heaven's 9 doors. And not only did he learn on how to use 4 black dragons, but he also learned about the ninth heaven's 9 doors itself. Let's think about it later. His second meeting with the female sage. The things he got from meeting her. And the Snow Queen's core was in Cordelia's arms. The failed ruler of spirits, who ended up creating light dragon Yalavaska. He had already decided on how it would be used. Cordelia also needs her power-up. Because Jude himself thought that it was unfair if it was only him. It'll take quite some effort, though. In order to realize Jude's own idea, they would have to do some hard work first, but he wanted to start right away when he thought of the smile Cordelia would have when they finished it. Jude, what are you thinking? Hey, know that you keep smiling. Ahem. Jude hastily cleared his throat while he carried Cordelia and spoke to Melissa again. First of all, can we get some rest? If possible, we'd like a meal too. Don't worry, my master's left behind some emergency food. Melissa widely smiled and Jude followed after her. At the same time, near the northern border of the Len Kingdom. Really, did that happen? Count Chase spoke in a low voice as he looked towards the north. He nodded as he thought of Jude and Cordelia, who would be somewhere in the vast expanse of the wild lands. Gar-El, as you have said, the jackdaws have to be prepared. Gar-El's judgment was right. They had to tell the north on what was happening in the barbarian lands. I will go north and join that Eastern Alliance that you mentioned. Gar-El, you go with Adelia to the Thunderdoom Fortress. I understand. It was as he had expected. But what would happen next was unexpected for Gar-El. By the way, Gar-El. Yes, Count. As I see you again, you look weak and frail. You don't have strength. Hey. Unlike Jude, Gar-El couldn't adapt to Count Chase. Therefore, Count Chase clicked his tongue and opened the space expansion bag. It would take a while until they met again if they parted here. Even if it was a little awkward, he had to settle this at once. Are you eating properly? You're not starving Adelia, right? That sword is old. I don't think it can be fixed. Ko-unt. Gar-El blinked his eyes because he didn't understand what the Count was talking about, but Adelia covered her face with both hands and screamed in her mind. Diawad. She was embarrassed. She was very, very embarrassed. But she didn't think of stopping him. Why would she stop it if her father would be giving something to Gar-El? Count Chase's bizarre nitpicking continued. Gar-El looked in disbelief as the bag in front of him increased into 2, and Adelia sat down as she was at a loss on what to do. A dozen minutes passed like that. After Gar-El and Adelia's luggage multiplied by several times, Count Chase saw them off as they headed to Thunderdoom Fortress, and he turned around to go his way. He then headed to the north. The main forces of the east and west headed towards Snow Breeze Plain. If they continued moving forward, the two sides would face each other 3 days from now. Morale was very high on both sides. The east had a great cause of saving the wild lands from the demon followers. The wild gods were also with them, so their morale couldn't be low. But we shall win. There was a reason why the morale of the West was high. Since its first military expedition, the Angry Bull tribe had never been defeated. Their wins and victories kept piling up like a mountain, giving confidence to the Angry Bull tribe, but fear to the defeated and absorbed tribes. In the end, it's a head-on fight. The pitched battle in Snow Breeze Plain would determine the fate of the wild lands. However, Hurricane, a high-ranking demonic human of the Devil's Eye, and the one in charge of the plan in the wild lands, suppressed his angry voice from coming out. The reason was simple. They were annihilated. The demonic humans and troops he had prepared to infiltrate and corrupt the Eastern Dragon Veins were annihilated. At first, he thought there was a problem with the demon record, because 7 mid-ranking demonic humans suddenly disappeared, but it wasn't that. 7 mid-ranking demonic humans really died and disappeared. There's only one possibility. It was highly likely that the Western troops who infiltrated the East by taking a detour to the south ended up meeting Eastern troops who also planned to infiltrate the West by going on a detour to the south too. And there was one group which came to his mind when it came to infiltration. Duo of death. A duo of a man and a woman. An evil witch of explosions who blew up anything that got in her way, and a cold-blooded black-haired cultivator. They got this information by combining the pieces of information left behind in the thoughts of the demonic humans who died, so they had no specific information about the duo of death, but it was clear that the two were the ones who defeated the mid-ranking demonic humans dispatched to the east. And this infiltration group too. The eastern side must have also sent the duo of death as infiltrators, so they had annihilated the infiltrators dispatched from the west. If it's true, and if those two hit the rear of the west. No, it's not a problem. Hurricane pondered for a moment, but soon suppressed his thoughts and made up his mind. The rear of the west was not empty. Everything that was happening in the wild lands was for 2 goals, and one of those goals were assigned to those who were left behind so that they could proceed with the ritual. It will be to our advantage if there ever was a confrontation. The power of those who were left behind greatly exceeded that of a mid-ranking demonic human. Even if the duo of death had interfered with everything in the east, they were clearly no match for those left behind in the west. And there's only 2 of them in the first place. The situation was different from the east, where the duo had to find and kill the infiltrators. What could only 2 people do in the vast west? Yes, there's only 2 of them. Even if they were strong, there were limits to what 2 people can do. No, even if they took more people to infiltrate, what could they do? Were they going to contaminate the dragon veins like what the Devil's Eye did? Let's focus on the head-on fight. If they destroyed the main forces of their enemy, everything would go according to plan. Hurricane regained his composure and covered the demon record. He repeated again to himself. There is nothing you can do in the first place. At best, they would attack the logistics, but in main areas, they were there, so it was okay. There was nothing the duo of death could do even if they infiltrated the west. What I should focus on more is this. Hurricane stroked his long white beard. He sharply looked at the east with his compound eyes like that of an insect. The sleeping Cordelia, who was curled up on the bed and drooling, suddenly raised her upper body and shouted. Explosion. Her shout seemed like a response to something. And Jude's thought after he had entered the room at that perfect timing. What the hell were you dreaming of? What kind of dream did she had that made her talk in her sleep and shout, explosion? Jude had a hunch but decided not to think too much about it as he approached Cordelia. My princess, are you awake? At his gentle question, Cordelia replied by sniffing with her nose. Because she smelled something delicious. Oh, ay. Cordelia said in a blank voice as she sniffed and began stretching her arms. She seemed to have woken up. Yuzu. Cordelia's waist bent like a bow as she did some stretching. Instead of falling down, she leaned forward and said in a still sleepy voice. Jude, you're there, right? She could smell Jude together with the delicious smell. Despite catching his scent, Cordelia asked in confirmation because of her eyes. I'm here, can you still not see? My sight is worse than before. Cordelia's blue eyes didn't have any focus. Jude frowned and replied. Melissa said that it's a temporary disability caused by straining yourself, but all your external wounds have been perfectly healed, so you'll recover in time. That's a relief. She was pretending to be calm, but she was also scared of the possibility that she wouldn't be able to see permanently. But I can feel that something's growing. If I become stronger than I am now, I think I'll be able to use the evil eye of paralysis without any difficulty. In the beginning, she had to make eye contact with the specific target in order to paralyze it, but now, she could paralyze anyone within her line of sight at the same time. The duration of the paralysis was obviously shorter, and she lost her eyesight as a price, but her skill had clearly grown. Even if I tell you not to overdo it, you wouldn't listen. No, wasn't it my fault in the first place that she overworked herself? Jude sighed and sat in a chair next to Cordelia's bed. He placed the tray he was carrying onto the bed. It smells good. What food is it? It's soup. Cordelia's face brightened at Jude's answer. Wow, I'm really hungry. She reflexively pat her stomach before her hands groped and touched the air. She seemed to be looking for the tray and spoon, so Jude clicked his tongue and said as he grabbed Cordelia's wrist. Stop, how are you supposed to do it if you can't see it? I'll feed you, Tilda. Hey, I'll be feeding you, so say, Tilda. Cordelia blinked at Jude's words. If it was the usual no, if it was the Cordelia back then at Frost Anvil, she would have asked him to feed her and opened her mouth, but it was a little different now. I am fine, I think I can eat it with my own hands. Why is he treating me like a kid? Okay, then don't spill it. I can do it, Cordelia said before she focused on her senses. Her eyes weren't completely blind, so as soon as she grasped the position of the tray, she stretched her hand and grabbed the spoon. She then began eating the soup with good skills. How is it, can you eat well? Being able to eat soup without spilling was not something a 17-year-old girl should be proud of, but he certainly found it admirable that she could do that despite being somewhat blind. Well, wouldn't it be normal if something spills? This isn't something that people usually train about. While Jude was admiring her, Cordelia felt better and said with a smile. You're not the only one who's good at moving your body, okay? I'm also good at moving my entire body. Tusk, I should have tied your hands. What? Jude pretended not to hear Cordelia's question. With a look of regret, he put away the bib he had intentionally prepared before he spoke again. Now then, listen while you're eating. Wow, this is really delicious. Can I have another bowl? Cordelia continued to eat while Jude spoke. He replied that there were 3 more bowls before he returned to their main topic. First of all, we did a good job. Although the development room collapsed, we secured the core of the Snow Queen. There was no explosion and the dragon vein was safe. Don't be sad. We'd all be dead if it exploded, right? No, I'm not sad. I was just a little disappointed. With a spoon in her mouth, Cordelia made a regretful expression, and Jude wondered how she ended up like that, but soon realized why. She was originally like this. Because Yellow Storm wasn't called a human disaster for no reason. She had liked explosions and destruction in the first place. Why are you thinking of something strange right now? No, I'm thinking about something nice and proper. Anyway, we have prevented the birth of Light Dragon Yalavaska, so one of the 7 major calamities is gone. This may perhaps be the biggest butterfly effect that we have ever done. It's quite unbelievable. If they hadn't gone to the Sky Roof mountain range. If they didn't have the Phoenix's feather. Everything led to this result. You can't say that it's all luck. The smiling Jude continued his words. Anyway, we got the Snow Queen's core right. Now that the development room is gone, we can't just leave it alone in this place, so I've decided that we'll take it. That's a good idea, but did Melissa agree? Of course, Melissa even helped. Jude said and then lifted up the moonlight that was under the bed. She implanted the Snow Queen's core into the moonlight. That's right. Moonlight has sockets. The sacred rod originally had socket holes for the purpose of strengthening it, but she was a bit uncertain if the core could be implanted there. However, the implant went more smoothly than she had thought. Perhaps Moonlight was also made by Magellan's High Elves. In any case, the Snow Queen's core was implanted into Moonlight, and as a result, the B-rank Moonlight was now reborn as an item with a minimum rank of A. Not S or SS. Because the Snow Queen's core is imperfect, we don't know what's going to happen if we use it at full power, but if we find a way to stabilize it, you may be able to use the same power as Light Dragon Yalavaska one day. Woo! A wand with the same strength as Light Dragon Yalavaska, one of the 7 major calamities. Is it mine? Can I use it then? Hehes, I love it, it's a power-up, power-up. It was nice that Jude got stronger, but the best thing was that she could become stronger too. Wow, the ice attribute was added, huh? Because it's the Snow Queen. The moon attribute, which could be called the basic attribute of moonlight, was a good match with the ice attribute. I'll be able to use ice magic. You should study then. Yes, teacher. Cordelia cheerfully responded as she put her spoon down and began to grope the sacred rod. And at that perfect moment, Melissa entered the room. Is your body okay? Melissa, is that you, Melissa? Unlike Jude, Melissa had no smell because she had no substance. When Cordelia asked as she looked in the direction of Melissa's voice, Melissa nodded her head. Yes, it's me. She warmly responded before standing next to Jude and asking in a low voice. Jude, have you told her? No, I was about to do it now. I will tell her then. What are you talking about? The last one was Cordelia. Melissa had a small smile before she spoke. I am very thankful to the two of you. Because of you two, we were able to avoid the worst. Oh, that's heh. Cordelia was weak to praises, so his cheeks quickly turned red. I've already told Jude, but I'll guide you to a shortcut to cross the mountain range. It's a passage that my masters used. Oh, really? Yes, it's a tunnel through the mountain, so you don't have to go outside. You can also save a lot of time. Wow, that's the best, thank you very much. Cordelia was more pleased in being able to avoid the murderous cold than the time being shortened. But Melissa. Yes, Cordelia. What will Melissa do now then? Hey, I mean, you said that the development room is gone. Yes, it's gone. Then there's nothing for you to do now, right? Melissa was an artificial spirit that was created to manage the facility where the development room was located. The reason for Melissa's very existence was gone, so at Cordelia's question, Melissa thought as she frowned and then replied with a slightly lonely voice. But I don't know when my masters will return. I should tell them about what happened here when they come back. You can write a letter. Hey, a letter, I'm leaving because of blank and so on. Melissa blinked at Cordelia's words. Because she had never thought of that. I'm leaving after leaving behind a letter. Yes, wouldn't that work? No, I mean, you're leaving to find your masters, right? Find them? Yes, to find them. Jude and I will be going around the ruins of Magellan anyway. Then, wouldn't it be possible to meet your masters there? We might also get clues there. Magellan's high elves were beings with a transcendent lifespan. And there were survivors of Magellan in Pleiades, though not as playable characters. We met a few of them in the second half of the game. So wouldn't it be nice if Melissa went with us? Cordelia turned to Jude, and Jude understood what Cordelia wanted to say, despite her inability to communicate with her eyes. He nodded and added something more convincing. You don't have to worry if it's the way to go there. Moonlight has one more socket left. We can put Melissa's core there. Really, can you do that? Of course, and this is actually something I'd like to ask you to do. We need Melissa's help in stabilizing the Snow Queen's core. If she could really do that, they would be able to increase the output of the Snow Queen even more than now. In other words, the Moonlight that had been upgraded to a rank would immediately be upgraded to A+ or S rank now. That's the best thing to do. Come with us, Melissa. Will you be my spirit? As Jude and Cordelia persuaded her, Melissa struggled for a while before she nodded. She didn't like being alone anymore. Moreover, as the two said, there was no reason for her to remain in this facility. Okay, I'll come with you. I look forward to working with you. Melissa accepted, and Cordelia widely smiled. Her heart had ached when she thought of leaving Melissa in a place where there was no one. And Jude smiled in a different way. Then Melissa, let's clean up this place while you are out. Clean up. Yes, clean up. The items left in the storage room. Jude and Cordelia also had a conscience. Therefore, they did not completely empty the treasure room of the wild fairies back then. Even before they fought the Guardian this time, they only took enough to take care of the Guardian. But things had changed. They would now vacate the facility. They were thinking of taking Melissa along as well. There's no reason to leave it behind. Jude's argument was persuasive, and Melissa unknowingly nodded. And Cordelia thought, he's reliable. As expected of my Jude, he's a first-class groom, the best one you could ever have. If it's Jude, wouldn't it be possible to bathe in the desert and drink orange juice full of ice? And half a day later, Jude and Cordelia eventually packed their luggage into the space expansion bag they had and began their journey to the west again. Their purpose was to blow up the contaminated dragon veins and cause confusion. At first glance, it seemed to be a terrorist's goal, but their actions were legal because they had the permission of the landlord. We have to pop it in a star shape. I'll make it pretty when I blow it up. Cordelia babbled as she moved while her rabbit tail shook, and the love-blind Jude didn't say anything as he just stared. And 2 days later again. The first explosion that heralded the second and third ones had begun. The invasion of the Northern Barbarians, a major event that took place in the early part of the game, was more of a background setting than an event that the players actually took part in. Regardless of which PC playable character one chose, the difference in levels between the PC and the enemies were too large that it was impossible for the PC to actually go to the front line and fight. Therefore, their actual participation came after the Thunderdoom fortress guarded by the jackdaws fell to the barbarians and demon followers, wherein the PC escaped or entered the devastated northern part of the Len Kingdom. Each playable character faced a different enemy. There were the fallen wild gods that Jude did not know were the wild gods back then, because there was no information about them in the game. Likewise, there were the corrupted barbarian warriors who became the puppets of the demons. If one chose the Jude route, they would face Violent Avalanche and Sun Song, and if one chose the Cordelia route, they would face the fallen Gentle Snow Breeze and the Fine Snow and Clear Snow brothers. And the enemies you'd face regardless of which character you chose. The ones who led the Northern Barbarian invasion and conquered the North had caused confusion and fear. The Great Warriors. They were special barbarian warriors, including Seven Horns, the chieftain of the Angry Bull tribe, and were in fact equivalent to mid-bosses in the Northern Barbarian part of the game. And Hurricane, a high-ranking demonic human of the Devil's Eye one, would meet in the beginning and the end of the Northern Barbarian invasion. He was the first high-ranking demonic human one would encounter if they normally proceeded, and was like a kind of wall that clearly informed the players of the difference between a high-ranking and a mid-ranking demonic human. The last one, the final boss of the Northern Barbarian part. One of Overlord Belial's henchmen, the Great Demon Kremla. The demon of the magic sword who killed Count Bayer and Gar El Bayer, as well as Count Chase. He was the strongest enemy in the north that Jude and Cordelia must stop. The eastern and western forces who were steadily moving towards Snow Breeze Plain stopped marching at a certain point, as if the two sides had an agreement with each other. They were at the point where both sides had the Snow Breeze Plain in their sight. They built their strongpoints, and there was no communication between the two sides, but the eastern and western forces knew. Tomorrow morning, the wheel of fate of the wild lands would begin turning. We will win. At the words of Sun Song, Red Wind awkwardly smiled as he looked at the Snow Breeze Plain with a nervous face. She wanted to brightly smile like Cordelia, but it was impossible for her. This was her first war. This was her first time in the front lines with so many people. So she was scared. Frankly, she was afraid. Thus, she had a very frightened expression on her face. It's natural to be scared. It was the same when I first went to the front lines. No, it was more than you. I'm only saying this to you here, but I wanted to run away at that time. Red Wind's eyes widely opened when she heard Sun's Song speaking quietly. Although she had won with the help of Jude and Cordelia, she would clearly be defeated 9 out of 10 times if she fought Sun's Song now again. He was a strong and seasoned warrior. He seemed to have been courageous since birth, so she couldn't imagine him being young and weak. But there was a time when he was a baby, and there was a time when he was a novice. But you have to overcome it. If you don't overcome it on your first time, you won't be able to go on any further. It wasn't just in battles. All of the things one faced in life had a beginning, and only by overcoming that first time would one be able to move forward. Aren't you the one who beat me? You're already a great warrior. Sun Song was friendly on his own way, but no matter how one looked at him, he had a hideous smile. But Red Wind also smiled. Thank you, Sun Song. Yes, and I'll say it again, don't be afraid, I will protect you. His voice faltered at the end of his words, which was unlike of a powerful warrior. He also avoided looking at her in the eye. Red Wind widely opened her eyes again, and she brightly smiled this time. I'll look forward to it. Yes, look forward to it. His words were a bit of a mess at the end, but his feelings came through to her. Sun Song cleared his throat several times and stared at the distance where the Western forces were. The chilly wind of the battlefield brushed past the neck of Sun Song. Gar-El and Adelia finally arrived at Thunderdoom Fortress, but the atmosphere wasn't very good. Even if they were the eldest son and eldest daughter of a family from the 12 northern families, the two had appeared beyond the border and in the barbarian lands, and not anywhere else. As expected of the jackdaws. Although they passed the city gate, Gar-El and Adelia were treated as potential enemies of uncertain identities, and not as guests. Therefore, instead of being guided inside, the two had to stand in the middle of the training ground while surrounded, and Gar-El was able to see Adelia's real self after a long time. An unparalleled sharp and vicious expression, and an unmatched tumultuous force. Her nickname as the Demon of the Royal Guard Magic Corps was not a false reputation. She was surrounded by more than 10 jackdaws, but far from being dispirited, she glared at each of them as if to kill them. What should I say? I think I can hear her growling. If Jude had been here, perhaps he would admire and say that she was indeed Cordelia's older sister. If Cordelia was clearly a small dog, Adelia was a real leopard or tiger-like beast. In any case, nothing good would come out of her tumultuous force. To begin with, they didn't come here to fight. Adelia. Gar-El wondered what to say, but ended up only calling her name. However, the effect was great. The tumultuous force emanating from Adelia's entire body disappeared at once. It wasn't only that. At Gar-El's call, Adelia was startled and surprised for a moment, and then blushed and made a somewhat shy expression. What should I do? I was so angry that I forgot that Gar-El was here. What if he thinks of me as a scary woman? Adelia hunched her shoulders and was at a loss, and the already love-blind Gar-El unwittingly smiled in delight. Of course, the jackdaws had lukewarm expressions at the dramatic change and the cause of the change. A few seconds passed by again. A man who could put an end to this situation finally appeared, as if to save both Adelia and the jackdaws. It's been a long time, Gar-El. He was Count H.R. Svelga, one of the 10 great swordmasters of the S-Len Kingdom, and also the head of the jackdaws. Gar-El was naturally impressed by his appearance, as he wore a white cloak and an armor with a golden eagle crest. It was their first meeting in years, but far from declining, Count H.R. Svelga seemed to be more robust. Gar-El Bayer greets Count H.R. Svelga. Let me also introduce Lady Adelia Chase from the Chase family. Adelia Chase greets Count H.R. Svelga. When Gar-El politely greeted first, Adelia followed him and gave her greetings by placing her hand on her chest, according to the etiquette of the Royal Guard. It's nice to see you both. I am Count H.R. Svelga. This is my son Lucas. Lucas H.R. Svelga greets the two of you. Standing next to Count H.R. Svelga was Lucas, who gave his greetings by thumping his chest with his fist like how knights do. He had met Gar-El once at Langesthay, but this was his first time in meeting Adelia. Let's talk in detail inside. Count H.R. Svelga already had many things to talk about with Count Bayer and Count Chase regarding Jude and Cordelia. However, Gar-El and Adelia's problem was added to it, because the two had crossed the border from the barbaric land side and not anywhere else. I'll tell you all about it. Yes, you will have to. Count H.R. Svelga quietly answered and turned around, and Lucas, who had a face full of questions, also hurriedly turned around. And Gar, El and Adelia looked at each other. I'll do the talking. Yes, I will protect Lord Gar El too. Their conversation with the eyes failed again, but the two did not know about that fact and just smiled at the same time before they began walking with satisfied faces. It took me hours before I finally figured out what the English equivalent of that StarCraft term was. Researching about this also made me realize that I'm really bad at strategy games. Like, this is too much for my brain to handle. On another note, Chapter 115 will be released tomorrow, not today as I've said yesterday. I've actually finished translating 3/4 of it, but I'm really sleepy now, so I'll post it tomorrow morning once I'm done with it. Terms used in this chapter. Fait accompli, French phrase commonly used to describe an action which is completed before those affected by it are in a position to query or reverse it. One-punch fight, aka hanbang timing attack, StarCraft terminology. A hanbang attack refers to a move when a player stops improving their own economy in order to mass an army to attack and finish the game, sometimes at a specific timing window. It shouldn't be confused with an all-in move, as a player performing a hanbang-style attack will prepare for it from at least equal footing with their opponent, and as such it isn't a move made out of desperation from a disadvantaged position. The term hanbang translates from Korean as one punch, referring to its nature. Source: hanbang timing. The eastern and western forces faced each other, with the snow breeze playing in between them. Red Wind and Sun's song comforted each other, and Gar El told Count H.R. Svelga about the circumstances. A day before, at a time when the prelude to the great battle that would determine the fate of the wild lands would begin. Ooh, it's a real star. If you say so, it must be like that then. No, it's a real star, okay. You saw how the light spread when it exploded with a bang. If my princess says so, it must be like that then. No, it's true, okay. Dobby believes in what the master says. I hate it, stop annoying me. Cordelia was annoyed even though he believed in her, so she stomped her feet and grumbled, and Jude saw Cordelia's actions as cute before he turned to the scene of the explosion. As expected, the rear of the Western forces, which was located beyond the Skyroof mountain range, did not have much defenses. All of the already corrupted wild gods had been mobilized for the battle, and each village or city only had a few troops left to maintain security, so it was virtually empty. Because they would never have imagined that we would cross the Skyroof mountain range. There was a reason why Melissa waited for almost 40 years. The Skyroof mountain range was like a roof in the sky, so no one could cross it. Anyway, we should focus on this now. The dragon veins in the west numbered 21 in total. It was natural that the Golden Dragon King couldn't open his eyes and was weak because all of the dragon veins were contaminated. If we blow up the rear, the front will be shaken. Therefore, Jude chose to hit the rear instead of directly going to the front line. They wouldn't be able to properly fight if they were anxious of their back. The longer the battle, the more it would become advantageous for us. Jude and Cordelia were not just operatives. They were powerful combatants who could fight against a mid-ranking demonic human alone. Therefore, sending a small number of troops would only help a little, and even aggravate the situation in the long term for the enemies. However, the enemies couldn't just watch their rear being destroyed, so they would have to mobilize a lot of troops in the end. Then we can pick and hit them. There were as many as 20 points to defend, and the enemies had no way of knowing on which of those points would Jude and Cordelia attack. There's also our mobility. Jude wasn't talking about running with Cordelia on his back. He was talking about the benefits of getting Melissa. We are able to use the central tunnel. The research facilities built by Magellan's High Elves. Most of the sites overlapped with the sanctuaries of the wild gods, probably because they were research facilities that utilized the dragon vein. In other words, if they could use the underground tunnels between the research facilities, they would be able to quickly go back and forth the dragon vein stream without being noticed. Tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, they'll be in touch with the front. When the news that the rear was being exploded would reach the front, it would be difficult for Hurricane to fight properly. In short, the battle between the Eastern and Western forces would not become a one-punch fight, so it would be possible to conquer the Western forces with a strategy. It will probably be tomorrow when they will move. If they focused on defense, the two would be able to earn enough time. Then the only problem left is Kremla, the great demon of Belial who destroyed the northern part of the Len kingdom. Numerous northern powers were killed by that powerful magic swordsman. Father and brother. It wasn't just Count Bayer and Gar-El. Count Chase was also killed by him, and Count Hr Svelga, the head of the Jackdaws, also died from his sword. We can't win with our usual methods. Jude and Cordelia had become stronger than when they first entered the Wild Lands, but it was still impossible for them to fight against Great Demon Kremla. However, not stopping him would make their dream of a perfect happy ending to be unachievable. The time when he was summoned. It had yet to occur. Hurricane had conquered the barbarian lands first before summoning Kremla to this world. A great demon like Kremla wasn't summoned the usual way. Our best course of action is to stop the summoning itself. If he had not yet been summoned, they would have to prevent him from being ever summoned. Our second best option is the Golden Dragon King. They could quickly wake up the Golden Dragon King, even for just a moment, to stop the summoning or completely kill Kremla. It might only be a short moment, but the power of the Golden Dragon King they had personally met was tremendous. They would become able to defeat Kremla with that power. We can do it. His original plan was to stop Kremla with Lena's power, but things had changed. They would stop Kremla with their own power, or use the power of the Golden Dragon King to defeat Kremla. If they couldn't do any of the two, they would then get Landius and Camel involved regardless of the means and methods. It would obviously take a considerable amount of time to mobilize the two people who were in the central and southern parts of the Len kingdom, so the method was almost a lesser evil, but it was better than nothing at all. Okay, let's do it. Jude himself had already greatly disrupted Hurricane's plans with their activities in the east. Unlike the original, Hurricane failed to take control of the east, nor could he kill Red Gale. The Eastern Alliance was formed, and the Devil's Eye had lost several mid-ranking demonic humans. Jude didn't know yet, but they also lost as many as 10 mid-ranking demonic humans because of Count Chase and Gar-El, so the Devil's Eye had suffered a devastating blow. Therefore, Hurricane himself had to join the big battle between the East and West, which he didn't have to do in the game. Jude was slowly driving Hurricane into a corner. Just a little more now, and they would be able to completely defeat him. It was a grand strategy to gradually tighten the enemy's breath. It was Jude's own specialty and favorite method. Your eyes look evil, you must be thinking of something bad, Cordelia said as she narrowed her eyes and looked up at him. As their difference in height widened by more than 10 cm, it became difficult for them to see each other at eye level unless she jumped, or Jude lowered his posture. Because of this, Jude saw the fluffy rabbit headband first in front of him. He saw Cordelia's face afterwards. Naturally, it was Jude himself who thought of the grand strategy he was pursuing with a long-term plan. It's a fait accompli. He would first establish the environment. He would then make the people around that environment believe it to be so. If his former colleagues had seen him, they would say, "What's this crazy guy doing?" and be unable to avoid clicking their tongues, because this was Jude's own way of fighting. Gradually, little by little. Drive the enemy to the corner step by step. What is it? What are you seriously thinking? Good thoughts, righteous thoughts, beautiful thoughts. Are you sick? Do you have a fever? Cordelia touched Jude's forehead and he smiled. Let's go to the next area. Let's pop it in a star shape this time. No, it was a real star, okay? Yes, if you insist. Jude intentionally replied mischievously, and after hearing the grumpy Cordelia's grumbling, he moved forward. And the next morning, when the eastern and western forces clashed, and a second dragon vein exploded, an unexpected variable shook the wild lands. Great warrior Garamaru. He was originally a powerful spirit warrior, but completely changed after accepting Overlord Belial's power through Hurricane. He extinguished the spirits that were no different from his kin with his own hands, and accepted the ancient evil spirits, thus becoming a powerful being who knew many ancient secret arts. He was quite unusual even in the game. It was the great warriors, and not the chieftains of each tribe, who led the barbarians in the destruction of the northern part of the Len Kingdom. Therefore, they reigned as rulers of the north, and were not meant to be encountered in the early stages of the northern barbarian event. Fighting them would only lead to deaths. Because the level difference was so great, the playable characters' levels were bound to be low, since the northern barbarian event itself was an event that took place in the early stages of the game. Though Cordelia had relatively enough time to level up then, she still had a low level because the time skip, a few months have passed since then, suddenly appeared in her route. On the other hand, Jude had begun his route right before the northern barbarian event started, so his level was obviously low too. 20-30 levels at most. And the levels of the warriors were around 65. There was such a disparity that no one would think of trying it given the odds of winning. One way or another, levels were like bullies in RPGs. Level 65. The great warriors were confident of their own strength. Hurricane was also confident in them. This was natural since they were stronger than Black Knight Bilvine, the strongest mid-ranking demonic human in the Devil's Eye. Great warrior Garamaru. In the game, he was someone to be avoided. A man who was like a reaper of death when one faced him. But now, sorry, we've become too strong. Cordelia spoke as her canines glistened, and Jude spoke as he wrote down Cordelia's words in a notebook. We've become too strong, memo. Why are you writing it down? What's that? This is just for blackmail, no, for negotiation later. Blackmail? Cordelia's eyesight sharpened as she read the text on the cover of his notebook. Cordelia's collection of shameful lines. Hey! The flames are rising. As Jude quickly closed his notebook and shouted, Cordelia looked at the front while gritting her teeth. Just as Jude said, the great warrior Garamaru had flames rising from his body. You be asterisk starred and be asterisk tch. A huge flame rose from Garamaru's whole body. Having acquired the power of the ancient evil spirit, Flame Master Killerman, he was able to create a strong flame, even in the wild lands where coldness dominated, and it was also possible for him to quickly turn the surrounding area into a land of scorching heat. He then glared at Jude and Cordelia. Once again, he tried to burn everything with the flames of hell. He roared, and Cordelia chanted the spell. And what happened afterwards? You be asterisk stards. Splash! A tremendous amount of water poured down just above Garamaru's head. But his flames were clearly the flames of hell. Although the intensity weakened a little, the flames were not extinguished. Garamaru shouted again. I'll thoroughly. Splash! Once again. Because double casting and spells echo were not mere decorations. Burned you. Splash! I'll make you. Splash! Waterfall x4. The flames died down, and Garamaru became like a rat that was wet with water, but he didn't give up. Because the evil spirit told him that the waterfall spell was over. So now was the time to start the flames again. Yuzo. The flames rose again, and Cordelia said, Waterfall. It was a spell that she chanted again. FSSSSSSSH. Water poured down from the air like a waterfall, and extinguished the reignited flames of Garamaru again. However, Garamaru never gave up. I'll. Splash. Never. Splash. Give up. Splash. Hey UF asterisk seeking B asterisk TCH. Hey. Garamaru lost his temper and cursed, and Jude nodded his head as he said, That's too much. He must have worked hard to gain that power. He must have had a clever wife, cute children, and an old mother waiting for him at home. Cordelia immediately protested at Jude's stare. Hey, why is this too much? And wasn't he a really evil B asterisk starred? Didn't he kill his entire family with his own hands? She also knew the background setting of the mid-boss to some extent. It was as Cordelia had said. After becoming an evil spirit warrior, he became an immoral person who destroyed his clan with his own hands. "I'll give you a beating," Garumaru angrily shouted and ran as the muddy water splashed around. Even if he couldn't use the flames, he had a strong body. He was about 2 meters tall, had wide shoulders, and his forearms and upper arms were thicker than a woman's waist. He had enough power to kill the slender Cordelia in a single beating. But Jude blocked her front. After standing firmly in front of Cordelia, he received Garumaru's charge from the front. Boom! Jude and Garumaru faced each other. Their hands confronted each other in a battle of strength. A weak B** starred with only a handsome face. Although he had recently grown fast, Jude was still in the mid to late 170s. He was a head shorter than Garumaru, who was nearly 2 meters tall, so their difference in height was more than twice. Added to that was their difference in muscle. Just by looking at the thickness, the difference was already several times more, so it was normal for Jude to be crushed. However, Jude was not pushed back a bit. At their current level, Garumaru was still above them, but Jude and Cordelia were not ordinary playable characters. They had stats from the titles they had accumulated so far. They had all kinds of auxiliary magic on them. They also had an overwhelming difference in items, overgeared. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Jude's strength was virtually a superpower. Garumaru tried to push and twist Jude's arms, but he screamed as his own arms were the ones that got twisted instead. Jude then pushed back Garumaru. After he shook off Garumaru, he turned to Cordelia. "You know, right?" "Yes." "Freeze." The blue light coming from moonlight swallowed Garumaru, who had fallen on the floor in one fell swoop. Garumaru couldn't resist the freezing magic, since he was soaked with water, and they were in the cold wild lands. Tsuk tsuk suak tsuk. Garumaru became a frozen ice sculpture, and Jude used the black dragon's power to strike Garumaru on the chest as he yelled. A white ring of light surrounded Jude and Cordelia when the ice shattered. Defeating him was easier than I thought. Because the place is cold, both water and ice magic are strengthened. Moonlight also got a serious power-up. If it weren't for Moonlight having the Snow Queen incorporated into it, and thus becoming stronger, it would not have been possible to defeat him that easily. Anyway, it's awesome. She was naturally happy to easily defeat Great Warrior Garumaru, since he was someone who couldn't be defeated at the beginning of the Northern Barbarian event. Jude lovingly looked at Cordelia and her flopping rabbit ears, and soon turned his gaze away. Demonic magic circle. The two were standing at a huge altar located some distance from the dragon vein. A large magic circle was engraved on the floor for a large-scale ritual, and 9 pillars inscribed with demonic characters were around the altar. As I thought, is this it? Preparations for summoning the great demon Kremla. It was a simple and effective way to hold small rituals in various places to store power for a larger ritual. Doesn't it look like the ritual here is already over? Cordelia said as she looked at the altar. The entire stone altar was stained with the blood of so many sacrificed offerings. Did they even sacrifice the demon followers? Despite the existence of such an altar, there was no enemy around here except for Garumaru. Given that there were few people in the village, it seemed that a large number of humans were sacrificed. There's too many. Too much blood had been offered. It was naturally true that Great Demon Kremla could not be easily summoned, but even if that was so, Jude felt that it was still too much. Because this isn't the only ritual. The rituals of the demon followers varied in form according to its purpose. And the ritual that was now held here was just a preparation ritual for the bigger ritual that Jude knew well. Too many. Jude thought so again. Too much blood was offered for preparation. What is this for? Does summoning Kremla require more offerings than I thought? Or the preparation ritual was not conducted by all of the great warriors, but only a few including Garumaru, and the preparation rituals that had to be done in 5 places were only conducted in 3 places, so more blood had to be given. That would make sense. But it was strange. He still felt that something was out of place. Jude. At Cordelia's call, Jude raised his head. She was frowning as she stood in front of the altar. He had admired Cordelia's intuition several times since they started working together. And such Cordelia's intuition was telling them something was different. The altar in front of them was far different from what Jude and Cordelia thought. And her intuition wasn't wrong again. Following Cordelia's gaze, Jude's eyes widened as he studied the magic circle that was engraved in the center of the altar. Different. It was different from the one in the game. It was not the original magic circle that was found in the ruins of the northern part of the Len Kingdom. Jude rushed to the altar and began analyzing it. The complex magic circle was disassembled on his head and arranged in a row. He read the truth contained in the magic circle. And at some point, Jude understood. The ritual conducted by Garumaru. The reason they needed more blood. And why all of this happened. What drove Hurricane to make a different choice from the game? It was Jude himself. What Jude himself had done so far led Hurricane to make a different choice. Red Gale did not die. As a result, the Great Storm tribe survived. Violent Avalanche, Gentle Snow Breeze, and Blue Whiskers did not become corrupted. The mid-ranking demonic humans who were dispatched to the east were annihilated, and the east was not divided. Caravel was not obstructed. As a result, an eastern force was formed. What Jude himself and Cordelia had done so far. And the positive changes that resulted from it. Jude's plans succeeded. Hurricane was driven into a corner. Hence, Hurricane made an extreme choice that he did not make in the original. Jude. Jude raised his head and stared at Cordelia. And he thought, if it really was what he analyzed, if that was really what Hurricane prepared for, where would he hold the big ritual? Where would he summon that? Eastern forces. He unconsciously said. There was only one thing he could think of. And this time Jude wasn't wrong. At the same time, in the Snow Breeze Plain located farther south from where Jude and Cordelia were. While the eastern forces were on the verge of clashing with the west, Hurricane received late the news about the first explosion that Jude and Cordelia caused. But he wasn't much bothered, because his preparations were over. Get started, Hurricane ordered, and his command spread throughout the western forces. The battle began with the roar of 7 horns, who led the Angry Bull tribe. Jude's strategy was simple. The eastern forces would become an anvil, and Cordelia and Jude himself would become the hammer. While the eastern forces would lead the confrontation in the pitched battle that would begin on Snow Breeze Plain, Cordelia and Jude himself would go and destroy the rear, making them unable to maintain the front line. The hammer had succeeded at the present moment. After the two crossed the Skyroof mountain range, their meeting with Melissa allowed them to use the underground tunnels left behind by Magellan's High Elves. They had the full advantage in striking the rear of the west because of the deserted mountain. But this alone was not enough. The success of the hammer alone did not complete the strategy. If the anvil can't hold out, if the anvil was crushed by the enemy's offensive, if his strategy was destroyed as a result of his enemy's tactics, that was usually impossible. But Hurricane could make it possible because he had a few aces up his sleeve. Ararai. 7 Horns, who was reborn as Belial's puppet, roared as his red eyes flashed. Tens of thousands of warriors joined in the cry that shook heaven and earth, and their vigor alone was enough to crush their enemies. And Red Gale didn't just watch it. Knowing the importance of fighting spirit, he raised his hand, and the chieftain of the Blade Song tribe, 9 Blades, roared on behalf of Red Gale. Kuarara. The eastern forces also shouted together. Horns were blown everywhere, and the wild gods with the eastern forces let out angry roars. They tried to cover the Snow Breeze Plain with divine power. But it wasn't easy. Something countered their divine power. The Western wild gods, who became hellish monsters as a result of corruption, also howled as their colossal evil thoughts offset the divine power. The Eastern forces numbered around 30,000. The Western forces numbered around 28,000 after losing some of their troops during their unification of the West. Boom, booms, boom. The drums boomed. Wearing a helmet decorated with the horns of a stag, 7 horns rode on a hellish monster that resembled a rhinoceros and moved forward, and the corrupted tribal chieftains lined up beside him. They formed a wedge formation like they usually did, and prepared to charge like turbulent waves. Red Gale had expected it, so he raised his hand again. Flags fluttered everywhere as the Eastern forces went into formation to counter their attack. Curata, curata. The Eastern forces struck the ground with the end of their spears. The Western forces roared again as they raised their weapons. Hurricane watched the scene from behind. His henchman, Sharp Horn, took a deep breath to calm his frightened mind. The mid-ranking demonic humans all over the place waited for the start of the battle. And at some point, when Hurricane exhaled and the moment Jude realized the truth from afar. Chag. 7 horns loudly shouted and declared. The warriors of the angry bull tribe charged forward. Boom, booms, boom. Tens of thousands of people charged at once, causing the ground to shake. Red Wind swallowed her saliva at the tremendous force that filled her eyes, and the nearby Sun's Song took a deep breath. 9 Blades drew his sword. He turned to Red Gale, who remained silent but was looking straight ahead as he counted down numbers. It was the know-how in hunting. Not too soon and not too late. Sweat trickled down the forehead of Red Gale. It was the first time for a seasoned and bold warrior like him to fight against such a large army. 1 breath. The angry bull tribe crossed the snow breeze plain. The roars of the wild gods and monsters reverberated in the sky. Now, Red Gale shouted. 9 Blades swung his sword and the hand flags fluttered. The crouching and waiting Blade Song sprang up and shouted, and Great Storm spread his cries throughout the battlefield with his wind. Violent Avalanche stood up, gentle Snow Breeze sang. Garua. The Eastern forces charged. Likewise it shook the ground. The front lines of both sides. Those who were at the forefront. They were immersed in extreme excitement. Drunk in the madness of the battlefield, they finally met each other's breaths. Barang. The waves met and broke each other. Those at the forefront were crushed and slaughtered, whether they were from the Eastern or Western forces. In an instant, dozens to hundreds of people lost their lives. It was a little different from what Red Gale anticipated. The Western forces' vigor and violence beyond one's imagination had led to that result. But Red Gale did not lose his composure. It was only a few hundreds out of tens of thousands. Battles on the first day were bound to cause heavy damage anyway. They had to stop them in Snow Breeze Plain in order to prevent the horrors of war from reaching the east, so they were prepared to have losses on their side too. Our guardian deities are with us. Those who dwell in the wild lands call those guardian deities as wild gods. Red Gale's belief wasn't wrong. The song of gentle Snow Breeze healed the warriors. Great Storm boosted the warriors' energy, and Violent Avalanche's cheering wasn't very helpful, but it was better than nothing. And Blade Song. He did not hide his temperament. He turned into a huge black wolf and headed to the battlefield himself as he showed off the power of a wild god. Be ripped to death. He didn't stop at trampling and biting them off. Blade Song used his divine powers to summon dozens of invisible blades around him to rip apart the Western forces. Blade Song, Blade Song. It wasn't just the Blade Song tribe. The Eastern forces loudly cheered, and Blade Song felt better as he went around the battlefield. Red Wind also fought hard. Instead of going to the front line, she used the Phoenix in a place somewhat behind it, and her gaze was drawn to the back of Sun Song, who fought at the forefront. Great Storm headed up to Sky after reverting his true form of a giant bird. From there, he monitored the entire battlefield and conveyed what he saw to Red Gale. Although the battle between the eastern and western forces were violent enough that those in the front lines were crushed, it had now entered a lull. Instead of people dying one after another, they were just pushing each other away. It wasn't bad. The western forces did not make any tactical maneuvers. There was no mobile unit in the back, nor was there anything unusual in the reserve. It was just a thoughtless charge. Perhaps we can do it. Would we be able to destroy the western forces altogether, instead of just holding our ground? Both ends of the eastern forces stealthily headed toward the front. They intended to besiege the western forces, who was thoughtlessly attempting to break through the front. If they succeeded in their besiegement, Great Storm thought that they would be greatly victorious. The song of gentle snow breeze reminded him of a victory song. And Hurricane looked up at the sky. Hurricane saw Great Storm, the beautiful white bird looking down from above, before he moved his hand. Do it. The ritual. What they had been preparing for. Sharp Horn lifted the flag. The demonic humans scattered all over the battlefield began to move, and the corrupted wild gods who remained seated rather than step forward since the battle began, finally stood up. Hurricane looked up at the sky again. He no longer hid his demonic human form's compound eyes. Cordelia knew Jude well. She could tell what he was thinking just by looking into his eyes. So she lowered her posture. She sat in front of the altar and made eye contact with Jude, who had a stupefied look on his face. Jude! She called him again. Jude came to his senses and stared at Cordelia, who looked at him again instead of talking. Jude took a deep breath. He calmed down after doing that several times. He returned to the Jude that Cordelia knew well. What kind of ritual is it? It was not a ritual to summon the great demon Creamler. Cordelia could understand that much. Jude opened his mouth. He told her what he found out. And soon after, Cordelia's intuition felt it. Her instincts told her. The Eastern forces would be defeated. They wouldn't be able to beat the Western forces. And as always, her intuition wasn't wrong. Hurricane easily captured the wild lands in the original scenario. Almost all of the wild gods in the west and east were corrupted and went under his command, and Red Gale and the other rebellious chieftains were purged, so the barbarians were united into a single army. Therefore, the headquarters of the Devil's Eye in the Argon Empire did not interfere with Hurricane's movements. Rather, they did not spare their support for him. Thus, Hurricane did not summon the great demon Creamler in the wild lands. He unified the barbarians, who together with the corrupted wild gods, destroyed the northern border area of the Len Kingdom before Creamler was summoned. He didn't need to do it before. It wasn't until the two swordsmen, Count Bayer and Count H.R. Svelga, defeated the barbarian chieftains as well as the corrupted wild gods, did he have enough losses. But everything had changed. Jude and Cordelia made it that way. Hurricane was cornered and made a choice that he did not make in the original. Oh, Belial. Hurricane creepily smiled. The West was virtually devastated. All was sacrificed except for the great warriors on the battlefield and the minimum number of personnel for rear support. A river of blood flowed at the ritual conducted by the great warriors. No one will be spared. The wild gods. All the firewood would be burned. In front of Hurricane. In a place located a little behind the battle between the western and eastern forces. At a point where both ends of the eastern forces were slowly approaching. The corrupted wild gods gathered there. The demonic humans gathered together. Hurricane commanded them. The will of Belial dominated the demonic humans, and they struck the throats of the sacrifices they brought. The ground became wet with blood as they stabbed themselves in the neck one after another. Blood, the currency of the soul. The blood covered the ground. A circle was drawn, and the corrupted wild gods stood around the circle as they offered themselves to the magic circle. The wild gods were close to 20. Tens of thousands of human offerings. And what was made from it? Oh, damn. Hurricane was filled with joy. The blood in the magic circle seemed to be wriggling, and the circle was completed by itself. Intricate patterns were engraved on the ground, and Great Storm, who saw all that from the sky, widely opened his eyes. It must be stopped. They had to somehow stop it. But how would they do it? Blade Song, who had ran amok on the battlefield, raised his head. He perceived the power concentrated in the magic circle of blood. He saw the evil energy that began to swirl above the magic circle. Gentle Snow Breeze realized it. Violent Avalanche collapsed and swallowed his scream. "It's open," Hurricane said. He burst out laughing from the depth of his lungs. Boodoo-oom. The space cracked, then opened, and from within it soared a huge gate. A huge crack that connected this world to another world. "Hell Gate," Jude said. Cordelia looked south. Hurricane laughed and the Hell Gate opened. Numerous monsters appeared. The Hell Gate was tens of meters in height. No, its size didn't matter. At that moment, everyone on the battlefield felt it. So they all turned. For a moment, the entire battlefield stopped. The Eastern forces raised their heads. The Western forces looked back. A small monster walked out of the huge gate. In fact, it was a 3-meter giant, but the gate was so huge. And then it continued. The demonic monsters continued to walk out. Dozens and hundreds. Then the time that had stopped began to flow again. A new fight had begun. "Run away," 9 Blades desperately cried. The battle line had already collapsed for a long time. The monsters poured out from the Hell Gate and broke through the front. The Western forces, who were fighting against the Eastern forces, were split and torn along the Eastern forces. It was pandemonium. The demons did not distinguish between the Eastern and Western forces. All the humans in front of them were torn and crushed to death. The evil energy of the Hell Gate overwhelmed the divine power of the wild gods. "We can't win," Great Storm said. It wasn't because he was terrified. It was a level-headed judgment. "We have to escape. It was important to escape from here. If they fought here, the entire Eastern forces would be destroyed." Blade Song understood that, so he didn't show his back to it. Rather, he stepped forward and shouted, "Warriors of the Blade Song!" At the command of the wild god, the warriors of the Blade Song tribe turned their heads. 9 Blades looked at his guardian deity, and Blade Song bitterly smiled. He declared to his warriors, "It's today. This is the place where we will die. The place to sing our last song." 9 Blades understood it. And he smiled. Because he was a warrior of the Blade Song. Because he stood on the battlefield while singing death. Moreover, it was a fight to protect. It was a beautiful and worthy fight. A good song was about to be made. Blade Song. Great Storm spoke, and Blade Song just smiled. He didn't say any weak-sounding words to his longtime rival, but he still had to leave a word. "Please take care of the children who were left behind. The children who did not stand on the battlefield. The children who would continue the song of Blade Song." "Brother," Gentle Snow Breeze shouted, but Blade Song did not look back. He fiercely smiled and charged. "Go, my warriors." The warriors of the Blade Song turned around. They charged together with their guardian deity. They became a living wall to buy time for the Eastern forces to retreat. "Father," Sun Song shouted, and 9 Blades saw Sun Song. He smiled and said goodbye. "Go," laid the children who were left behind. "Blade Song wants it too." That was it. 9 Blades no longer looked back. He charged together with the warriors of the Blade Song tribe. He bought time with his blood and life. "Retreat!" Red Gale loudly shouted. Gentle Snow Breeze cried tears of blood and sang. She raised the energy of the warriors of the Blade Song and added strength to the feet of the fleeing Eastern forces. Red Wind cried and grabbed the arm of the Roaring Sun Song. The Eastern forces retreated. The Blade Song tribe became a wall. The Western forces broke down the wall, and demons poured out from the Hell Gate. Golden Dragon King. Blade Song's entire body was covered with blood as he confronted the monsters from hell and thought of the king of the wild gods. He remembered the cheeky children who had the dragon's emblem. Why, though? At the last moment, the faces of the two came to his mind. Farewell. Blade Song flew towards the monsters. He sang his last song. The eastern forces collapsed. The Snow Breeze Plain was stained with blood, and the western forces was also virtually destroyed by the Hell Gate and the demons that poured out of it. About half of the western forces, common soldiers, were corrupted and became low-level monsters that could no longer be called humans, and the other half were sacrificed to maintain the Hell Gate. Hurricane won one battle, as he declared. He had to sacrifice too many things to do that, but he didn't care. It was already spilled water. Moreover, his purpose was to cause chaos in the wild lands and in the northern part of the Len Kingdom. The method was different, but what was more important was the result. Inside the Hell Gate, a demon with an immense power was approaching. If he could come down to this world. If that happened before Hurricane's life ended, before he could no longer maintain the Hell Gates. O Belial, I will dedicate the wild lands to you. At the time when Hurricane prayed, as if worshipping a god, Violent Avalanche fell alone while running away, and then raised his head. He saw a man with a red cloak standing in front of him. It was a man he had never seen before, but the man somewhat reminded him of Cordelia, even though they did not look alike at all. The man saved Violent Avalanche, who was being chased by the monsters. The man looked away and saw the Hell Gate that rose far away. Having deeply studied the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom, he knew about the Hell Gate. Cordelia. The man spoke in a low voice, and Count Chase turned to Violent Avalanche. And at the same time, at the edge of the east, a place called the Sacred Place. Blue Whiskers shriveled at the terrifying aura he felt in the west and raised his head as he looked at his back. He hastily flew into the temple, and he faced that person. The white wings of the angel spread out. The angel who washed away the aura of hell opened her eyes. Lena Ainsberg, one of the 5 heroes who ended the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom. She woke up and looked west. Hell Gate. It wasn't something unfamiliar to them. The chances of seeing the Hell Gate in the Legend of Heroes series were surprisingly numerous. But the timing was wrong. Only one gate appeared in the first episode of Legend of Heroes. Demon Prince Bakehazel, the final boss who caused the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom. The last battle in the first episode involved defeating him and closing the Hell Gate he opened. The next one was in the middle of the second episode. Opening the Hell Gate on this world was by no means ordinary. In addition to numerous offerings, a catalyst was needed in order to open the Hell Gate. Catalyst. Things that came together with the overlords of hell when they descended on this world in the past. The catalysts varied in form and were different from each other, but they were not common. Even in large organizations like the Devil's Hand or Devil's Eye, there were only 1 to 2 catalysts that could open the Hell Gate. Lena's situation was different. The Hell Gate that opened in Endymion was not summoned in the usual way. A link had formed when Lena escaped from hell and returned to this world. Therefore, it differed from the usual Hell Gate in several ways. The Hell Gate was opened in the opposite way, from hell to this world and not from this world to hell, so the Hell Gate remained open because it could replenish its power from hell without any additional support, sacrifices. But that's not it, he didn't do that. Jude stared at the altar once again. He interpreted the disassembled magic circle in his head. It was the usual Hell Gate. It was like the one he saw several times in Legend of Heroes 2. It can't be kept open for a long time. It needed power to maintain the Hell Gate. If the Hell Gate was opened on Snow Breeze Plain as Jude had thought, there would be no other means to maintain it other than through sacrificial offerings. About a week at most. There would naturally be some miscalculation, because he inferred it from the various events in the game, but the difference wouldn't be that great. Did I go too far? No. Did he turn the board upside down? TN, the board here refers to a game board like a chessboard. Basically, Jude and Hurricane are playing a game of chess, and Hurricane's plans are losing to Jude's strategy, so he turned the board upside down. I explained it here because the word board gets mentioned several times later in this chapter. There were few opportunities to summon the Hell Gate. In the game, instead of summoning the Hell Gate, Hurricane corrupted the wild gods and took control of the barbarians before attacking the northern part of the kingdom, because it was much more efficient. He opened the Hell Gate after destroying the northern part and attacking the royal capital. Which would be more effective, opening the Hell Gate in the wild lands or opening it in the royal capital of the Len kingdom? He didn't even have to think about the answer. It was definitely the latter. To begin with, he had no information if Hurricane had a catalyst. But it made sense. Even Jude himself wouldn't waste the catalyst in that way. The best way was to summon the Hell Gate in a key place after subduing the wild lands, the barbarians, and the northern part of the Len kingdom. But he didn't do that, because Jude himself had obviously interfered with Hurricane's plans every time. Compared to the game, Hurricane was currently in a very bad situation. But summoning the Hell Gate was excessive. This was almost a desperate move on Hurricane's side. It meant that he gave up most of the power in the wild lands that he had secured. Why? Wasn't it better to have the Western and Eastern forces fight? Why did Hurricane give up the fight? There was a reason. An incident that changed Hurricane's mind that Jude didn't know about yet. Gar-El and Adelia. Count Chase. The three annihilated the infiltrators who were trying to infiltrate the East via the South. It made Hurricane think that there was no other way to do anything except for a head-on battle, so Hurricane made a decision. If he failed in whatever he planned, then he would do something that he wouldn't fail in. He would do something that his enemies couldn't stop. Because that was better than a complete failure. That was the time he turned the board upside down. The power of the wild lands had already been cut in half. In his situation, even if the Eastern forces were defeated in the head-on battle, the damage would be too great. He wouldn't be able to properly carry out his original plan with just half of the power. So he flipped the board. He created a new board. But Jude didn't know about that even if he was a rotten water. Therefore, Jude stopped worrying about it. He needed information first. Their present location was not a good place to keep thinking about it. Cordelia. Cordelia immediately responded to Jude's call. She also had a stiff face as she was worried about it in her own way. Let's move for now. Yes. She had to brighten up at times like this. Cordelia energetically responded on purpose and took the lead. He didn't tell her where their destination was, but there was only one place to go in this situation. The underground passage left by the High Elves of Magellan. Melissa gave them information that was not available in the game. Magellan, the Magic Kingdom. The elves in Pleiades were commonly thought of as mostly living in forests and mountains. Even the Dark Elves refused to live underground unless they had no choice. However, the High Elves of Magellan built a city underground. Most of the facilities were built under the mountains or under the ground, as if they were dwarves. It's because of the dragon vein. Magellan's High Elves discovered an unknown power under the ground. They researched and studied on how to somehow use that great stream, and as a result, they set up a livable base underground that was close to the dragon vein. An infrastructure across the wild lands. The High Elves built the infrastructure along the dragon vein stream. In addition, several facilities were installed to use the power of the dragon vein. The facility in the Skyroof mountain range was one of those. The dragon vein was different from what it was. It was much thinner and was blocked everywhere. But Magellan's High Elves resolved that. They smoothened the flow of the dragon vein, and relay facilities were built throughout the wild lands to strengthen its flow. And that's how the current dragon vein was made. And as Jude had expected, Jude came to his senses at Cordelia's call again. The two had gone back to the underground passage. Jude took a deep breath. And he thought again. The gate is open. That was clear apart from the others he thought of. Cordelia's intuition and the ritual altar guarded by Garumaru also informed him of this fact. What should we do now? Should we break the western dragon veins as planned? We don't have enough time. The reasons for opening the Hell Gate in the game all led to one answer. To call out a mighty being to this world who couldn't be summoned in the usual way. Hurricane went overboard. He opened the Hell Gate using several catalysts from the Devil's Eye. If so, he wouldn't be satisfied with someone on the level of Creamler. He would try to call someone higher than Creamler to this world. How many days would that take? If he calculated the time required compared to the other events in the game. 5 days at most. If it was short, 3 to 4 days. Then it was impossible for them. Even if they used the High Elves' tunnels that they had opened, they wouldn't be able to make it. The Wild Lands was too wide for them. Town Portal. A space-leaping door that was used by the High Elves. According to Melissa's investigation, there were still a few functional space-leaping doors in the west. They would be able to immediately return to the east once they got to that door. But there was no way to directly go to that door from here. Going there would consume time anyway. Jude's thoughts deepened. He thought and thought again. And Cordelia saw such Jude. She groaned and began to worry about it like him. Is there any other way? Maybe there's a solution. Yuyu. This kind of thinking didn't suit her, nor was it something she liked to do. So Cordelia groaned and repeatedly stomped her feet. But she didn't stop thinking. And at some point, Cordelia raised her head. She grabbed Jude's shoulder in a hurry. After forcibly pulling out the struggling Jude from the pit of thoughts that he had sunk into, she talked about the idea that came to her mind. What do you think? It wasn't a specific idea. Just one idea. Jude stared at Cordelia. He didn't blink once, and in response, Cordelia's shoulders drooped and she made a glum expression. Was that not it? What was I thinking? I guess it's not something I should think about. So when Cordelia began to be dispirited, Jude unexpectedly burst into laughter. He brightly smiled and hugged Cordelia all of a sudden. Jude. You're the best, my princess, my angel. What? My what? The grossed out Cordelia got goosebumps at his choice of words, but Jude didn't care much about it. He tried to resume his thoughts again to make Cordelia's idea a reality. But at that very moment, Jude and Cordelia looked at each other again. They focused on the voice they heard in their minds. Thanks to the heroic sacrifice of Blade's song, the Eastern forces were able to leave the battlefield. But too much blood had already been shed. But even so, Great Storm looked towards the west with sunken eyes. He stared at the Hell Gate located far away that was radiating a chaotic aura even at this moment. He was at a great distance, but his eyes could see at a far distance from up high. He could still see the monsters crawling out of the Hell Gate at this time. That was why he declared, "It must be closed." Great Storm didn't know much about the Hell Gate. Only a few wild gods remembered the days when the Magic Kingdom Magellan fought the Overlord of Hell. Excluding the Golden Dragon King, there was no other wild god at that time who was active at the present moment. Therefore, the wild gods didn't know much about the demons. They couldn't even guess how long the Hell Gate could be maintained and what beings would come out of it, so they thought of a more resolute response. At any cost. If the Hell Gate stayed as it is. If more demons came out of it. The wild lands would cease to exist. It would just become a small hell ruled by the demons from hell. Brother, violent avalanche. Great Storm looked at his back. Gentle Snow Breeze's face was filled with tears as she sniffled. She didn't like Blade's song very much, but that didn't mean she deeply hated him. But Blade's song had saved everyone and died. He made a heroic sacrifice. Even his tribe and even the numerous children in the wild lands. And even violent avalanches' whereabouts were unknown now. Gentle Snow Breeze's tears did not dry out. She couldn't stop crying. But Great Storm reached out to her for a moment and wiped her tears. He said with a forced smile, "He will be fine. He's a wild god even if he had lost his powers. He has lived far longer than we have. He just took the wrong road and didn't lose his life." "Is that so?" "Yes, it is. Yes, it is." Great Storm hugged Gentle Snow Breeze and patted her back. It was like he was soothing a child, but Gentle Snow Breeze was actually taller than Great Storm in terms of their human forms, though that didn't matter to them. She held back her tears in the arms of Great Storm. "We must gather the wild gods." Every single wild god in the east had to be gathered. The surviving main force and the remaining troops in the east had to be combined in order to form the final do-or-die army. Blade Song and his children sacrificed their lives to give the east, no, the wild lands, one more chance. So they had to live up to their songs. Gentle Snow Breeze, gather the children, gather the wild gods. Gentle Snow Breeze nodded. She wiped her face several times before she turned around and ran. Great Storm gazed at the back of Gentle Snow Breeze. He then turned around and looked at the west. Hell Gate. It reminded Great Storm of Blade Song. He remembered the wild gods of the west that he hadn't seen for a long time. All of them were dead. And now more wild gods might die. But even so, it's our calling to protect the wild lands. Great Storm let out a cold breath. He prepared for the final battle. Hurricane stared at the Hell Gate. The creepy aura of hell gave him a new power. Hurricane smiled. His stronger power had now allowed him to sense someone approaching from beyond the Hell Gate. He paid his respects to it. Demon Prince. A demon with a title. It surpassed the great demon Creamler and was a being in the same class as Bakazel, who caused the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom in the past. Hurricane's smile turned wry. His thoughts had changed too, perhaps because of the aura of hell. Indeed, this was my calling. So what if it wasn't the royal capital of the Len Kingdom? It would be enough if the demon prince descended. He would lead the demons and end the wild lands. They would then advance to the Len Kingdom. The demons and monster that came out from the Hell Gate did not go through a contract process. Therefore, they did not follow or were under Hurricane. But that didn't matter to Hurricane, because the demons and monsters knew it. The demon prince was coming. It was their calling to follow its command. Master Hurricane. Hurricane turned to the voice that was mixed with fear. The ever-faithful Sharp Horn looked at him with eyes full of hesitation. Sharp Horn couldn't help it. The Western forces were destroyed, and the angry bull tribe who accepted the aura of hell had now become creatures that could no longer be called humans. Even at this moment, human offerings continued to be offered in order to maintain the Hell Gate. Hurricane looked at Sharp Horn. Sharp Horn was no longer a human too, he was close to a monster. His human mind still remained, but it was only a matter of time. So Hurricane showed him a little mercy and told him the words that he wanted to hear. Not bad, you did well. It will be fine if you follow me as always. Sharp Horn nodded at Hurricane's words. He let go of his fear and blindly believed in Hurricane's words. He wouldn't be able to withstand the current situation otherwise. Just wait, for the greater glory shall be with us. Hurricane brightly smiled and looked at the Hell Gate again. He waited for the moment of its advent as he fully enjoyed the aura of hell. Zelena. An answer came back when Cordelia spoke. There were no specific words, but a clear feeling was conveyed. Lena woke up. The holy angel came back to this world. And what that meant? Another possibility rose. Zelena. Jude and Cordelia then knew that she had spread out her wings of light. She left the sacred place that was guarded by blue whiskers and flew towards the west. The connection was lost. But that was enough. Lena conveyed her will to the two. Having known that the Hell Gate had been opened on this world, she immediately took action. Lena woke up. Cordelia's voice was filled with excitement. She would obviously do that. Because Lena woke up. Holy Angel Lena, one of the 5 heroes who ended the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom. But that wasn't the only one. The reason why Cordelia got excited. The reason why Jude wanted to embrace Cordelia once again. The two had the same idea at the same time. They looked at each other and laughed, and Jude opened his arms. However, Cordelia stepped back and brightly smiled instead of hugging Jude. She took out the item she had always carried since she got it, and kept it where her eyes could reach even when she was taking a bath. She took the item from her back and placed it in front of Jude. Heavenly Judgment. A sword forged by the god herself, by Oriel, the Archangel of Judgment. A sacred weapon that only angels could use. And the other possibility. Something Lena could try to do now that she was awake. My angel. Jude tried to hug Cordelia as he shamelessly spoke, but Cordelia retreated with disgust. She soon giggled and said as her canines glistened, "I'll show you a nice look. For the battle ahead. There might not be one angel who would fly in the skis." Jude nodded his head, and he smiled in satisfaction. Because he finished it right at this moment. Their best strategy. As expected of my Jude. Jude was satisfied with Cordelia's smile. They went into action again in order to reach a perfect happy ending. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.